Although they had a number of weaknesses, double-bladed lightsabers provided their users with both offensive and defensive advantages during lightsaber combat in relation to single-bladed lightsabers. Double-bladed lightsabers, also known as saber staffs, allowed for a faster rate of attack and greater defense with an additional blade in which to block and parry incoming lightsaber strikes. Further, they gave their users an undeniable psychological advantage in combat, as the appearance of two blades could catch their opponents off guard and overwhelm inexperienced practitioners. But despite these advantages, double-bladed lightsabers were extremely rare amongst the Jedi, with the vast majority of Jedi opting to use the more traditional single-bladed weapons. In this video expose, I will explain why more Jedi didn't use double-bladed lightsabers, touching upon the weapon's Sith lineage, and the reasons for the ultimate rejection and repudiation that was decided on by the Order. To understand why double-bladed lightsabers were so uncommon among the Jedi, it's necessary to understand the history of the weapon, and more specifically, its connections to the ancient Sith. The original double-bladed lightsaber was invented by the Dark Lords of the Old Sith Empire, which was established from 6,900 to 5,000 years before the events depicted in A New Hope. It was these ancient Dark Lords who devised the schematics and sophisticated designs of the weapon, wherein a single lightsaber mechanism was given two sets of emitters, thereby producing the weapon's two blades. However, although the double-bladed lightsaber originated with the ancient Sith of the Old Sith Empire, the weapon was not brought to the attention of the Jedi, or even the galaxy at large, until the actions of Exar Kun in the Great Sith War, more than a millennium later, roughly 4,000 years before A New Hope. The story of Exar Kun was one of great tragedy for the Jedi Order, which would ultimately influence the Order's opinion of the double-bladed lightsaber. Having achieved the rank of Jedi Knight, Kun would ultimately fall to the dark side and assume the title of Dark Lord of the Sith, endeavoring to destroy the Republic and Jedi to usher in a new Sith Golden Age. Kun's fall to the dark side wasn't surprising to those closest to him, as he was naturally quick to anger and overly confident in his abilities. However, Kun's path to the dark side was considerably bolstered by his discovering the forbidden knowledge of Sith history, filling the Jedi with an insatiable curiosity regarding the Sith, and driving him to discover as much as he could about them. Ultimately, Kun's search would bring him to the planets of Onderon, Yavin 4, and the home of the ancient Sith of the Old Sith Empire, Korriban. Further, he would also encounter the images of ancient Dark Lords Freedon Nad and Marka Ragnos, with the latter completing Kun's initiation into the dark side and declaring him worthy of assuming the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith. Having been declared a Dark Lord, Kun unleashed a devastating galaxy-wide conflict upon the Republic, known as the Great Sith War, 3,996 years before A New Hope. Importantly, early in the conflict, Kun traveled to the Jedi Library on the planet of Ossus, confronted and murdered the Jedi Keeper of Antiquities there, and took possession of a rare Sith holocron. It was from this Sith holocron that Kun was able to acquire the schematics and designs for which to convert his standard lightsaber into a double-bladed lightsaber, thereby allowing him to unleash the weapon upon the galaxy for the very first time. And that's exactly what Exar Kun did. Having sent his Brotherhood of the Sith to wreak havoc across the galaxy, Kun traveled to Coruscant to save his captured apprentice, who was in Republic custody after a failed attempt on the Republic capital. After murdering the Supreme Chancellor and freeing his apprentice, Kun was confronted by his old Jedi Master, Photo-Sios Droma. When Droma refused to join him, Kun unveiled his new double-bladed lightsaber, which he used to overwhelm and kill his former master, having caught the Jedi completely off guard and unprepared to deal with such a deadly and new invention that hadn't been seen before. Ultimately, with his apprentice having been redeemed back into the light, Exar Kun was defeated and killed by the combined efforts of his former apprentice and the Jedi on Yavin 4. However, this wasn't before Kun unleashed enormous devastation on the galaxy, borne out by the monumental conflict. nearly a quarter of the civilized worlds that were part of the Republic were ravaged by the war. The war brought a tremendous amount of shame and blame upon the Jedi Order, given that the conflict was so connected to a fallen Jedi, with many referring to it as the Exar Kun War. Facing a backlash from the galaxy, and also having been humbled through the conflict, the Jedi implemented a number of reforms for their order, including greater uniformity in their teachings, and greater oversight by masters over their apprentices. But nonetheless, the legacy of Exar Kun and the imagery of his double-bladed lightsaber was a stain that hung over the Jedi Order. Kun himself started to be regarded as the inventor of the double-bladed lightsaber, thereby forever linking him with the weapon. In the aftermath of the war, distraught over their failure to foresee the actions of Kun, the Jedi formed a secret Jedi Covenant. Although the Covenant was dedicated to keeping watch for any indications of the Sith's return, the Covenant also dedicated itself to recovering and storing artifacts connected to the dark side. Following Kun's death, his double-bladed lightsaber was stored within the Covenant's Sanctum of the Exalted, and was ultimately turned over to the Jedi High Council for safekeeping. Therefore, Exar Kun, but really his double-bladed lightsaber specifically, clearly came to be viewed by the Jedi Order unfavorably, as his weapon wasn't only considered to be a Sith and dark side artifact, but was also deemed worthy of requiring safekeeping by the High Council. As the Jedi Order progressed after the Great Sith War, the Order looked to distance itself from the legacy of Exar Kun. In addition to suggested texts, such as Exar Kun, the Lesson, the Warning, which was provided to Jedi apprentices to learn and avoid the actions of Kun, the Jedi adopted the tradition of frowning upon and discouraging the use of double-bladed lightsabers. Although there wasn't an established rule forbidding the weapon's use, the Order attempted to strongly persuade its students against creating or using a double-bladed lightsaber. Rather, all Jedi were encouraged to use traditional, single-bladed lightsabers. To this point, it wasn't merely the legacy of Exar Kun and the weapon's Sith lineage that caused the Jedi to promote a rejection of saber staffs. The Jedi viewed the weapon as a tool that was designed merely to kill more effectively, which was directly in conflict with their own philosophy that looked upon the lightsaber as a tool of defense and not offense. Therefore, the Jedi opposition to the use of double-bladed lightsabers was also consistent with their philosophy regarding lightsaber combat, wherein a single-bladed lightsaber was considered to be sufficient to serve as guardians of the Republic and promote peace and justice throughout the galaxy. Of course, some Jedi would take up saber staffs despite this position taken by the Order, but the traditional stance against double-bladed lightsabers was generally adhered to following the death of Exar Kun. For the roughly 3 millennia that followed the devastation caused by Kun and the Great Sith War, double-bladed lightsabers were uncommon and used in a limited fashion by the Jedi, despite the fact that it had come to be adopted commonly by the Sith in both the Jedi Civil War and the New Sith Wars during this period. Even when the Sith made double-bladed lightsaber training readily available to all students and were achieving success in the New Sith Wars, the Jedi tradition of rejecting double-bladed lightsabers was still significantly observed by its members, as the Order continued to frown upon its use. Following the New Sith Wars, and the inaccurate belief amongst the Jedi Order that the Sith were completely eradicated from the galaxy, roughly 1,000 years before A New Hope, the Jedi tradition against double-bladed lightsabers caused the weapon to fall into complete obscurity. Although the Jedi would integrate them into their training regiments, double-bladed lightsabers were essentially unheard of in actual lightsaber combat, thereby representing a continuation of the old Jedi tradition that discouraged their use. Amazingly, however, during the millennium prior to the Clone War, double-bladed lightsabers were also surprisingly rare among the Sith themselves, despite their common usage by those who followed the dark side. As seen by Darth Plagueis' reaction to Darth Maul's saber staff, one of complete shock and bewilderment, the disuse of double-bladed lightsabers that was adopted by the Jedi Order had in many ways also started to be seen within the new Sith Order that started with Darth Bane. Although Jedi Masters such as Pong Krell used a double-bladed lightsaber during the Clone War, they continued to be extremely uncommon weapons among the Jedi in the Order's final years, as the old Jedi tradition continued to be recognized and respected. Therefore, given the connection that double-bladed lightsabers had with the ancient Dark Lords of the old Sith Empire, and the devastation caused by the actions of Exar Kun in the Great Sith War, as well as the Jedi Order's general rejection of lightsabers as an effective killing and offensive weapon rather than one of defense, the Jedi Order developed a millennia-long tradition of frowning upon the use of double-bladed lightsabers, and encouraged students to use single-bladed weapons, thereby resulting in them being extremely rare and uncommon within the Order. So there we have it! Why more Jedi didn't use double-bladed lightsabers. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions? Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me, for the Dark Holocron.